Hi everyone. Today is Employee Appreciation Day in many different countries. So you will definitely want to stay tuned as we have an amazing guest and we will introduce her in just a moment. For those that are new to the show, I'm Jorge Gamboa. A lot of my friends call me George. Welcome to Unstoppable Leaders and to the Spanglish World Network on Singo TV, channel 250. If you haven't done so, please download the Singo TV app on your app stores, iOS or Android. And while you download it, show us some love and leave some comments and rate the app. The application is free. And it's also available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire, Fire TV sticks, Roku sticks, and any smart TVs manufactured 2016 and forward. So without further ado, welcome, Victoria. It's a pleasure to have you here. How are you doing?
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it, Jorge.
Yeah, awesome. So before we get into the Employee Appreciation Day and all the goodies around that topic, can you tell us a little bit about how did you decide to study what you studied and how did you start your career?
Well, thank you for asking that. It's actually pretty a straightforward path, really. When I went to college, I thought I wanted to be a doctor. When I took chemistry and biology, I realized my thinking was wrong because I couldn't really manage the classes. It was a lot of memorizing and studying, and it just wasn't really in alignment with what my brain could actually do. But what was psychology. And I just enjoyed psychology so much. So I actually minored in psychology and majored in it's kind of a weird religion because I wanted to go to India when I studied abroad. And actually, that's a part of the reason why I started to do social work was because once I went to India, I mean, the country is amazing, beautiful country, beautiful people, but there are a lot of issues. There's a caste system. There are other things in terms of like poverty. So, when you see that as coming from America, and I thought kind of like I didn't have a lot growing up, I really realized in traveling the country that really that there's real poverty, and limited resources. So after college, I moved to New York 2 weeks after I graduated from university, and I applied to go to school at Columbia University for the School of Social Work. I really wanted to help people. I thought I wanted to work with families and children because of my experience in India, and then I soon realized that it was just so much more of a challenge to work with kids because you're really only with them for 45 or 50 minutes. And I thought I would be better suited to work with adults. And so that's when I started working with adults who had chronic mental health issues, substance abuse issues. I first worked at a treatment place in the Bronx and then to the Upper West Side of Manhattan. And that's where I spent most of my time, 12 years, honing my craft, learning how to kind of help people. And through that time, I actually started incorporating more wellness practices into therapy because it was connected to a health center. And so we kind of had to help people monitor their diabetes and their blood pressure, and food, exercise, all impacts your physical health. And of course, now we definitely know impacts your mental health. And so when I started my private practice, everything that I learned, including continuing education on health coaching, mindfulness meditation, and underlying psychodynamic psychotherapy, just melded that all together, created a practice. And then I started networking and connecting with people in finance and insurance and real estate, and realized that not everybody has it together. And so when we would have these one-on-one conversations, I'd be talking to them about, their mental health and wellness, things that they were doing with their sleep because they couldn't sleep much, feeling stressed at work. And so then that expanded to doing employee wellness, which is exactly where I am right now in New York City.
Wow, yeah, no, fascinating journey. And Well, talking about employee wellness, what are the how do you see what is happening today after the pandemic and we have moved beyond that? What's going on? What do you see in the world?
Well, it's not great. Jorge, it's not great. So prior to COVID, when I was creating these workshops and connecting with companies, it was mostly emotional intelligence, which is really about like self-awareness and then social awareness and having empathy. That was popular. That's what companies wanted. And some mindfulness and meditation. So I was, kind of going around doing those workshops. After COVID, companies became very interested in mental health, in wellness, and really understanding the complexity of how somebody's mental health and wellness out of work impacts their work or could be even impacted by work. And we all saw this in COVID because we all had to go virtual very quickly. And, a lot of us were disconnected from our colleagues and coworkers, physically disconnected. People were getting sick. There was a lot of loss. I mean, there were so many issues all at once that were impacting employees, companies, organizations, managers, and of course the C-suite. And so during that time, business really picked up, and I did a lot of wellness workshops and a lot of coaching and consulting with companies that were struggling with helping their employees with the transition during COVID.
And some of those changes, I guess, they apply also to small businesses as well, right? Not necessarily just corporations. Have you seen similar problems by entrepreneurs or
Yeah, yes. And I think a lot of them who were used to kind of being, networking and out on the streets and connecting with people to build their businesses really kind of took a step back in terms of their businesses. Well, it actually kind of depends on what type of business they had. I think some companies that were smaller, there was one that I was working for during COVID in particular, really expanded because everything was virtual, and they did a lot of website development and internet like services. So they expanded and swelled so fast that like the stress of the employees as they were scaling was just so exponentially like higher. And so kind of helping them to like manage all of that through like some of the workshops. I think that with entrepreneurs, it's interesting. Like they're like kind of independent, but have some dependency on like relationships and connections. And so, for me, I personally had like a challenging time as an entrepreneur and as a therapist, like doing everything virtually because I need to have that like kind of physical relationship contact, which is something we can probably get into a little bit later about how important that is. Although, we were able to do it, right?
and you talk a little bit about stress. Is it different the way one experience stress when it's caused by external factors like growing or the pandemic, all those things, than when it's more of an internal mental health thing, like I don't know, borderline depression or something bigger that can be happening inside? Is there a way to easily figure out which way it is, or
Well, for everybody, it's different, right? But there are people who have like, diagnosable like anxiety and depressive disorders. And we know that their stress system is much more sensitive to the external world. So in terms of having, I always like to think of it like this, like, we all have a threshold of like stress and anxiety that we can manage. For some of us who've had stressful childhoods or are kind of like, type A or people pleasers or struggle with like imposter syndrome, their stress like levels are a little bit higher, like their baseline is higher. So sometimes it's hard to like kind of dissect like what is like a diagnosable like anxiety disorder as opposed to what is like a personality trait or personality characteristics that like lead you to feel much more sensitive to external stress that's going on. And I think that like for everybody it's kind of different. And what I generally usually say, like, it's so important to get help and to talk to a therapist. And even there's so much stigma around it, which is still so very frustrating as like a therapist, because even if you're experiencing a small amount of stress and you don't have any like prior history of any mental health issue, anxiety or depression or anything like that, you can learn so many great techniques to manage stress and build better resilience to help you with it. And that helps both in and out of work. Because, if you're stressed around like work or around your personal life, that gets integrated no matter how much you try to like separate it. So
you mentioned the importance of connecting with a therapist every now and then. When we take a look at Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, there's a lot of manifestation, meditation, breathing
yeah.
exercises, and then we have professionals like you, psychotherapists. What's the difference? How do you know which way to go, and how can you provide some guidance on what how to proceed?
Right. Yeah. I get it, because there are a lot of coaches and there are a lot of clinicians. There's a lot of therapists. There's a lot of people online who have personal experience and want to share their stories of resilience, and then they will say that they're able to like kind of help people, and they probably are on some level. But what I always say is most people, especially in the US, I'm not sure how it is in Canada, but like have insurance through their jobs or to the marketplace. And it's actually less expensive to probably see a therapist than it would be to buy a coach or to get a coach or so my suggestion would be, because if you did start therapy, you would recognize whether or not you needed to kind of continue. And you can always talk to the therapist about it as well, because they would be able to help you. We're like, oh, okay, looks like things are going fairly well. We had this one issue with work, or you had this hard time or hard project, or well, most of the time it's about relationships, this relationship that you struggled with. And then they would give you some tools and you would kind of move on. I do think coaching is helpful, because I know that they don't look at the past, and therapists tend to look at the past. The reason why we look at the past, because the best predictor of future behavior is our past behavior, and understanding like why we do what we do. Because look, I mean, there's research around like 80 to 90% of our behavior, thoughts and feelings are unconscious. And a lot of times we don't have an awareness about it. And when you don't have an awareness about it, then you end up acting on those unconscious feelings. And so that's where, we talk about dream interpretation or interpreting a behavior that you did. With a therapist, you will explore what that means. And the difference between probably a coach and therapist that I would say is that the therapist has in mind your past in a way that is clinically relative to what is happening in the present moment, and then what will probably happen in the future, and how to like undo some of that stuff.
Yeah, so it kind of helps somebody learn from their previous experiences, their previous, I don't want to say mistakes, but experiences, so they can get better at the next time they face similar challenges or something like that.
Well, and I would add unconscious experiences that you don't remember that you experienced.
Uh-huh.
And this happened to me recently. So I watched, okay, so this is going to get a little personal. Jorge. I just saw this movie, Origin. If you haven't seen it, you have to see it. It is a life-changing movie. It's about Isabel Wilkinson. She wrote The Warmth of Other Suns. I don't know if you've heard of the book. She won a Pulitzer Prize for it.
No, I haven't.
No. Okay. She also wrote this book called Origins, the Origins of Our Discontent. cast the origins of her discontent. Anyways, so it's a movie. I just saw it, and I had such a strong emotional reaction just generally, but a strong emotional reaction to a particular scene where you kind of are witnessing, and I'm not going to give it away, but you're witnessing a vicarious trauma, meaning a trauma happening to somebody else, right? I lost it. I was crying in the movie theater. It was very, very intense. And I remember not thinking at that point that that related to something that happened to me in my childhood, but just being like, wow, I can't believe I'm having such a strong reaction to this. Fast forward the next day, I'm walking, I'm in the gym, and I'm just like, my mind goes to a scene of when I was younger. So my father is from Puerto Rico. Not that all Puerto Ricans are like this. I just want to like caveat this. But there was, there's a way of thinking about raising children in terms of like, if you did something bad, you're going to get hit, right? So the chancleta, which is like the slipper, right? The bell, that kind of thing. Now, it didn't happen often, but when it happened, it was definitely very, very troubling and traumatizing. I was kind of a people pleaser and a good girl when I was growing up. And my brother, quite the opposite. He was just like constantly getting into trouble, doing all kinds of crazy things that would get him into trouble. So he actually did not, because of his behavior, not because he wasn't smart, but he didn't pass the first grade. He failed the first grade. And the scene that came to my mind as I'm at the gym, because of the movie that I saw the day before, was my brother getting hit by my dad and me just crying and telling him that he needed to stop. And then, of course, my dad's like, why are you upset at me? Your brother like deserves this. But again, like that feeling of vicarious trauma got triggered from the movie. And I hadn't thought about this. See, this is what happens in therapy is that you recognize, oh crap. Like this is something that happened to me that I hadn't I buried and I hadn't dealt with or thought about in a long time. Now, I'm not angry at my dad. I get I understand everything, but for me, being able to recognize that pattern and what happened, that's what makes therapy so helpful.
Wow. Yeah, it puts everything into perspective. And how does that help you moving forward? Because we talk a little bit about your personal experience, the past, something that you experienced, and how can that prepare you for the future?
Right. So, it helps you to prepare for the future because if what you can't unknow, right?
Yeah.
And so knowing the things that have happened to you in the past and how that has impacted you and the decisions that you've made now, you can start to make different decisions. So a lot of times people are just, maybe they're not really satisfied with their work or they're not satisfied in their relationship. And sometimes it really actually comes into play with relationships, and relationships not only with partners or your children or your family, but also with colleagues and coworkers. A coworker could remind you of your parent or of your sibling, and that can impact your interaction with them. So for example, if I had a boss and he was similar to my dad in a way where a little machismo, kind of that type of energy. I could have all this anger towards my father and unresolved feelings towards my father that get projected out onto the boss. Whereas the boss is just basically doesn't really care too much about me, is not being aggressive or, angry towards me, but I'm interpreting as that because it reminds me of my father. And that's what we call projection or transference of feelings of somebody who you've had in your past that you still hadn't kind of resolved. And look, I don't think you can really resolve fully all of these things, but awareness is the key, is being aware. So when you're making future decisions, you're more aware.
Yeah, and I guess when you have that high level of awareness, it helps you to stop reacting and more respond better to the situation, so it's not that personal type of
Exactly.
confrontation.
And that's exactly what I tell everybody. I love that you said reaction, because reaction is the immediate like response that you have. Responding is the response. It's like, oh no, he's not my dad. He's my boss. He doesn't like, he's not doing this purposely. He's on a tight deadline. He's not angry at me. He might be angry at something else. You know, like it really helps you to kind of like understand a little bit more realistically what is happening in your life, and then make different choices, right?
Hmm. Oh, cool.
Yeah.
So now that we have clarity on everything, on the different flavors of help, how does an employee or an executive, any professional, know when is a good time to talk to a therapist?
So, you know, I think anytime you're struggling with a relationship or stress or feeling overwhelmed with something, that's always a good time. Oftentimes your body keeps the score. There's a very famous book that you know we use as I mean, it's now like lay people use it too, but we use it as therapists. And it really is that your body holds on to a lot of feelings and things, and will show up in like very strange ways. Pain. It will show up in not being able to sleep, having headaches. So recognizing if your body's talking to you, you need to listen. And in listening, oftentimes, you know, you go to the doctors, and the doctors even say like 80% of the reason why people go to see a doctor has to do with some sort of stress related issue. That's, I mean, you know, stress is physical. It's a physiological reaction. Always cracks me up when I hear people, especially like, you know, people talking about stress and like, this is what you need to do, this 3-step stress management thing or whatever. It never works, because stress is a physiological response. It's not a cognitive response. Our cognitions, our thoughts impact it, and can make it much worse, but our bodies keep it. And so really, if you are a leader or anybody, and you're struggling with relationships, you're struggling with, you know, some sort of medical or physical issue or element that you haven't had before, that would be a really good time to talk to somebody. And a part of the work that I do is, people don't know that, right? So and they think of therapy as like this, it is stigmatized. They think I'm going to sit there and look at them and, you know, stare at them with a blank piece of paper, you know, doodling while they talk, or
Yeah.
not say anything. I'm a very active therapist, and I do this also too in the corporate wellness space. When I do the one-to-one wellness coaching with my employees, I help them to figure out what are some of the basic things that they need to address, and then get them to their EAP, which is an employee assistance program that most companies have, or get them to a therapist that takes their insurance.
Mhm. Um, what type of activity or help, without getting into too much details, do
Sure.
you leave them like homework in between sessions? What techniques can they apply to help get better?
So, well, because stress, at the bare minimum, you can ask anybody. They'll tell you that they feel stressed about work or relationship or something. People, we're always worried about something. And that's just inherently as being a human. And that's because the external world is not, that we can't control like what is happening in the external world. We sometimes can't even control what we do and what we're thinking and how we feel. So our brains are always trying to have a sense of control. And so how that shows up is through worrying.
Hmm.
And, you know, I remember watching this TED talk, and they were like, you know, talking about like, you know, you worry about all of these things, and less than 0.5 of them percent comes true. It's like, it's ridiculous. We spend a lot of time, our brains, not us, because it's not consciously like, if I don't want to consciously worry. Nobody wants to consciously worry. It's like, it's not fun. Your brains want to worry though, because it's always trying to protect you. It's always trying to protect you in several ways. One in particular, which is that you don't die. It's trying to keep you alive. And so in trying to keep you alive, it worries about like all kinds of situations that can happen. I'll give you a personal example. I am always worried about getting hit by these e-bikes and bicyclists in New York City because they do not follow the rules. And so I am hyper vigilant and hyper aware, much more stressed out walking on the streets of New York than I was pre-COVID. So our brains, again, we're great at like kind of monitoring the environment, even if you're not doing it consciously. Your visual field system is doing it. Your body is doing it, because I'm sure you've had times when you're about to walk into the street and then a car, your body like pulls you back and you're just like, oh my God, what happened? You didn't consciously make that decision. You didn't say, I'm going to step back because look, there's a car coming. No, your body just does it automatically. And so that's what stress is that it is your body's natural response again to the physical like kind of environment. And what we kind of have to do is we have to just give that up, that idea that we have control over it. And I think that's the number one thing, is like a lot of this stuff just happens naturally. Our brain will worry, our bodies will be stressed out. The important thing goes back to awareness, being aware that it's happening. Oh, wow. I'm worried about, I'm not even outside on the streets. Why am I worried about getting hit by a bicycle? And then being able to stop that and just say, oh, it's interesting that I'm doing that, but I'm okay now. I feel I'm safe. Everything is okay. I'm alive. Because again, that's what your brain is just worried about, is being alive.
Is that something similar? You're applying it, for example, when people are stressed, but is that similar scenario when people are kind of stuck in their professional careers and they want to be, there's that also, you need to move outside of your comfort zone, and you have that struggle that this is too comfy and I prefer to stay here, and you don't have that awareness. That's when you get stuck. Is that the similar type of situation?
I think that it's definitely related. So, there is, okay. So I don't know if you know Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So a part of, he has safety as like the second ring from the bottom. Like, but I honestly think safety is the first. Like your body, brain, whole being wants to feel safe in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So when you decide to try to make some changes, or you want to make some changes, it's so hard to make changes because that's familiar. And so that stuck feeling is really the familiarity that you already know. So if you make a change, again, your brain does not like uncertainty. It doesn't like change really. And I'm talking about unconsciously, it doesn't. Like everybody says, oh, but I love change. I love seeing new things and doing new things. Yes, but your brain all doesn't. And it wants things to kind of be just to be normal. And so and status quo. So that sense of like being stuck is really that sense of kind of being kind of stable in a familiar situation that feels comfortable. And if you do something different, it's going to feel uncomfortable and you're going to come across friction. And that, honestly, I mean, the other part is our energy levels and expenditure of energy. If when you are changing and you're making new like habits and doing that, takes up a lot of energy for your brain. And I can't remember how much energy our brains take up of our body, but it's like a huge amount considering it's, so small. But it takes up energy. And we don't, as humans, our bodies don't like to use energy very much. So then you're kind of like in that space where you want things to change. You want your life to be better. And you want to feel more satisfied. But then you also are scared because like the familiarity of where you are keeps you kind of there. And that's that stuck feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fascinating stuff. And going back to the original Employee Appreciation Day,
Yeah.
what are the trends or how things have changed when it comes to taking care of employees from the wellness perspective? What have you noticed?
Well, I have to give you some sad news. Today I was at the gym and I wished everybody a happy Employee Appreciation Day. They were like, "What? Today's Employee Appreciation Day?" And I said, "They didn't tell you? You don't have an email? They're not giving you pizza? They're not like celebrating you?" So I hope that that is not an indication of other companies. I hope that that was just a one-off, because it is so important to feel appreciated. And I know that a lot of people will say, they say this about like the history months that we celebrate. Women's History Month is this month, right? Why are we celebrating women? Like whatever. The point is you're taking a moment in space to say to somebody, an employee that you have, that you appreciate them. As women, we appreciate you and all the things that you have done. And even though we want to think, especially as managers, that our employees know that we appreciate them. I think like companies and organizations, we pay you, so of course we appreciate you, of course we value you. But there is something very, very significant about just being a human being, and like somebody saying to you in a very like gracious, loving, authentic way that they appreciate the work that you actually do. And I think that that goes such a long way. And my hope is that because, people are struggling, particularly in New York, about returning back to the office, and there's a lot of transitions that are going on, that companies are and organizations are making employees feel more appreciated, because they kind of need to, because they want them to come to the office. And I hope that that will continue over the next, well, forever.
Yeah, yeah. Like they say, and I have said this many times on this show, no matter what industry you are, pretty much every business begins and ends with people. That's
Exactly. And what do we want? We want to be seen, we want to be heard, and we want to feel valued. We want
Mhm.
to feel valued, and that those are so important, like fundamental things. The issue is, and actually I was at an HR talk yesterday, and it's great, it's so true. Give your employees lots of like, appreciation, tell them that you care about them. The issue is that a lot of times the managers and the people who are higher, like they have a hard time because they aren't even really taking care of themselves. And so because they're limited in terms of their own self-care, or maybe don't feel as appreciated or valued, that they end up like kind of trickling that down. I wouldn't necessarily say it's like projection, but it's like a watered down version of something like that. It's like, well, look, I did that when I was young. Like I didn't, no one appreciated me. No one said, thank you to me. And I did it. There's like kind of attitude around like, and this is what you want. But like, if you think about it, wouldn't it have been so nice to have your boss or your manager say, "Oh my gosh, you did such a great job. We really appreciate you. This company wouldn't be where it is without you. You all like do all these amazing things that help us all, and we appreciate that." So
Yeah, yeah, because people don't hear that very often, especially in stress-related jobs. If the manager is head over heels with stress, it's
they don't have time to, yeah, they're not thinking about you and your mental health and wellness, or giving you praise, because they're overwhelmed. And I really do appreciate the managers who are able to do that, but it does require a lot of bandwidth. So I'm sure you've seen that too, right? In the work that you do with like leadership.
yeah, and that's a problem. A side effect of the problem that everybody experiences in many companies, right? Because you want people to be more engaged, more productive, and you always want more out of the people that are working with you. But it all comes down to things like this. And I think Appreciation Day is an excellent point in time to just stop, be more thankful, even
Hmm.
if it's because that's the day to be thankful to your employees. But yeah, it's a good reminder.
Yeah, yeah, it's a great reminder. And then you can even say to them, I know I don't tell you this all year, but on Employee Appreciation Day, which is always the first Friday of March, I am going to make sure that you know that I appreciate you. And hopefully that extends throughout the whole year when I'm so busy and overwhelmed that I can't say it.
Yes. Uh, so one of the things that has happened in a lot of different industries is the impact of AI.
Mm-hmm.
Has that touched the area of wellness in what you're doing, or not yet?
It has, and it will be. I mean, it will. I mean, people are coming up with so many different ideas and utilizing AI for things that, like, like writing an article around wellness or like sleep or whatever, that everybody has, that it's already accumulated from all the other people that have written articles on it in the past, and then maybe they're making it better, maybe not, I don't know. But I definitely think, look, I feel obviously ambivalent about it, because as a therapist, for me, relationships with people, that's how we have evolved. The reason why we are where we are today as humans is because we have been able to connect, build community, communicate, and protect one another. And what's interesting is AI is here. There's no changing it. I think a lot of people are scared, and I totally understand that. I'm scared too, I think, because we've heard, is it going to take our job? Is it going to take over the world, and we're going to be,
Yeah, explain it.
yeah, who knows where they'll put us? I don't know. But so there's so much fear. For me, what I just say to myself and to people who I know that are kind of struggling with what is it going to do for their career? How is it going to impact their career? How is it going to impact, them, is that, we just have to go back to relationships with people are so important. And I'm sure at some point it's going to be so close to feeling like the AI is a person. But it's not. And we just have to have hope that those relationships that we have as human beings will continue to persevere, in the future. Because I don't know. I mean, like the stuff I know, it could know like 20 million times more things than I know, right? But I think sitting across from me as a human is different than sitting across from an AI who probably knows more than me, would be different. I would hope that I would be the better choice, but I don't know. I mean, we'll see, Jorge. We'll see.
Yeah, it's a whole new world with this.
Yeah, it is a whole new world.
Although you work mostly with adults, have you noticed any trends with the new generations that are graduating from university and colleges? Because they spent COVID isolated,
Yeah.
and I see it in my world, where the social relationships are not as they used to be before. It's more problematic.
Yeah. What have you seen in the social relationships being
For
problematic?
example, people in the young 20s, late teens,
Hmm.
they don't relate as often or as common as we used to do at that age, person to person. Everything is more virtual, more, and the isolation seems to be continue to expand beyond the COVID years, right? That's what
Yeah.
I have seen. That it's harder for a lot of people to build this type of relationships.
Hmm. Yes. It's interesting because I have a different, the pool of people that I see are working and have
Yeah,
started like in the workforce. So it's harder to make that assessment from my experience. But what I will say is there it makes a lot of sense that people are struggling socially, even as adults, right? Because I don't know if this is similar in Canada, but in the US, like loneliness is like the Surgeon General of the US is saying that this is an epidemic, like, loneliness and disconnection. And what we do know is anything adults are going through, like that trickles down to to young adults and to teens, in addition to the use of like social media and the virtual world and feeling connected but not really being connected, physically. So again, I haven't really kind of seen. It would be interesting to actually look up at some of the statistics around it. But I just definitely think like the world that we're living in is very challenging for everybody. And I could imagine, going to being in high school during COVID, and then going to college. I mean, I did have one person that I was seeing who came to see me actually right after COVID, and she was in high school, and that's when her anxiety, got triggered. And since then, things have gotten much better. Obviously she's been in treatment, and she's been like more connected to people, has like a great friend group, and is in college now. So I'm very proud and happy about that. But if there was a predisposition to being anxious or feeling depressed or feeling disconnected, it definitely would have increased for those who have gone through COVID, at those pivotal like developmental like times.
Yes.
So and it'll be interesting to see like, the kindergartens, the first graders, like all the, the preschool, the elementary school kids, the middle school kids, how as they kind of come up. I guess they would be so they would probably be in high school now. They're in high school now and starting college. So yeah.
Yeah.
I wish I had a better answer, but I mean,
No, it's good to know what's happening over there.
yeah.
So, in a nutshell, if somebody has insurance, they should. It's a very good idea to just take a moment, check how they are doing, and
Yes.
if there's anything that can be of help.
Yeah, I think so. I think, especially like as an employee, if your company offers, they have this thing called EAP, which is Employee Assistance Program, where it's a free, like you could have like 3, maybe 10 visits with a therapist. And then if you want to see somebody more, you can go ahead and do that. It really is, I think, just so valuable to just like in terms of like awareness and awareness about other people and how you interact with them, and an internal awareness about like what's kind of going on for you, kind of like what we talked about before. I think that most people have they have so much access to like the internet and social media. And, I do see a lot of people posting on like, oh, narcissism and gaslighting and love bombing. As a matter of fact, the other day I was listening to Trevor Noah. He was interviewing Kevin Hart, and Trevor Noah has been in therapy. He talks about it all the time. So I'm not like, disclosing anything. I'm not his therapist, although that would be really fun and great. But anyways, he was kind of encouraging Kevin Hart to go to therapy. And Kevin Hart said, well, what are you doing? Are you like gas bombing me? So even him saying that, I wrote an article actually on LinkedIn about it, because it's 2 words that are like psychological terms that have become so well known because of therapists and like, people looking up different psychological terms because they're trying to understand other people's like behavior. And so I would say like, yes, that's helpful to understand people's behavior, but you can't diagnose people with narcissism. You can't like as a person, like, you can see that they may have traits, but what is more helpful is figuring out what you could do for yourself so that you don't like date somebody who has those traits. Or if you have a boss who has those traits, how do you deal with it? And like that in therapy, you can definitely do that in therapy, which is very, very helpful.
So, just to wrap up, two quick questions. One is, if somebody wants to reach out and connect to you, how can they do that? And who would be the ideal person to connect with you?
Well, so I have a limited private practice in New York. I see couples short term, and also patients short term as well. But what I really am focused on now is employee wellness and helping companies create a culture of wellness and helping employees feel like the company cares. So I'm looking for companies or connections with HR or benefits managers or small business owners, medium-sized business owners, or big corporations. I mean, I'd love to just chat about like anything that they're doing wellness wise and how they can get the engagement higher, because we know actually if 1 out of 4 people have mental health issues at work, they have anxiety or they're like feeling stressed out or overwhelmed, less than 10% are actually using the wellness services. And a lot of companies pay money for the wellness services that they have. They have like, a Calm app or Headspace app, or they have like a physical training app, and employees aren't using it because there needs to be like a linchpin and a connection. And so part of what the work I do is really help the employees feel comfortable, first of all, talking to a therapist, and then like translating that to actually using the EAP services for the free therapy, or finding a therapist that takes their insurance, or using a wellness app to help them with like improving their sleep if that's what they need, or learning how to like breathe differently, or anything that kind of comes up that's around both work and also stuff that like goes on outside of work and at home that impacts their productivity. And I also think too, Gen Z in particular, but millennials as well. And I think that, the new people kind of coming into the workforce, they really are looking for, again, companies that care, but they're also like looking for a company that they want to stay with, that's going to help them to improve and to grow. And I think like growing not just in your career, but growing in like kind of emotional intelligence, understanding kind of like mental health and issues, around all of that pop up, understanding how like, simple tools and techniques that you could do around breathing, around, viewing the sun, can help you in your overall like life, and also help you with your coworkers and your colleagues too, especially managers who continue to struggle with like how to help their employees. So I think, really looking for those kinds of connections and those kinds of people. And you can get in touch with me through LinkedIn, Victoria Rivera, Wellness Psychotherapist. And also I have an Instagram, which is at Wellness Psychotherapist. I also have a Facebook page, Victoria Rivera, and a YouTube channel, which I haven't really quite put. I'm going to put a new video on soon, but haven't really been worked. I do more of the Instagram and the LinkedIn stuff.
Yeah, no, thank you, Victoria. This is amazing. And after this conversation, when I think about wellness psychotherapist, it's like that hidden secret that can help you level up your personal game, so you are more in control and more in charge of how you operate, regardless of whatever it is you're doing.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, no, pretty cool.
That'll be my tagline. I'm going to take that. That's amazing.
Awesome.
But it's true. It is true. If you know yourself, you are much better at like being in the world.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think we're running out of time, but thank you for sharing your journey, your insights. This has been very valuable. And for everyone else out there, thanks for watching. And this show can also be heard in the Spanglish Radio Network. You can check out spanglishworld.ca for all the news and programming. And remember, Spanglish World, watch it, hear it, read it, download it. Until next time, thanks and bye-bye. Thank you, Victoria.
Bye. Thanks.